Okay, hi, I'm Teodora, and
Hi, my name is Jack.
this is
Hotheads.
Hotheads. I almost said High Power.
This is not. This is not high power for legal purposes. This is not high power. High power, don't sue us.
Literally stop.
Don't have your guy contact our guy. Don't sue us, please.
Okay, so welcome back to the show. This week we're doing a 30-minute show, and it's gonna be. We spoke a little bit about it last week, but it's going to be on the movie Idiocracy and essentially like what the movie was talking about. So this was something Jack was very interested in. So I'm going to let him kind of give you like a brief intro to this whole topic.
Okay. Two really important movies on democracy, government, and people. Idiocracy, Dr. Strangelove. Two of the most important movies in my opinion, right? I'm not saying they are the most important, but two incredibly important movies. The basis of Idiocracy, for those of you who haven't seen it, I urge you to see it, is that the government runs an experiment where they take the most average people and they put them in a deep freeze. And when they put them in a deep freeze, they wake up hundreds of years in the future and they realize that they are the smartest people on the planet. Now, this happens through a process where as society continues on, the gene pool population depletes in some way because all the smart people stop having kids or have kids later in life, and all the dumb people have kids and have a lot of them. Now, is it realistic? We can debate that. But I will say that the realistic part is not necessarily the increase in population or even the temperament of someone's IQ. The realistic part is how people react, right? And how the process of people just doing like idiotic things, hence Idiocracy being the name, occurs, and it just kind of gets swept under the rug because that's the way that we've always done it. That's the way that we do it. This is the way it's supposed to get done. And key word, I'm going to say it right now, Brondo. It's got what plants need. Right. This is such a it's such an Orwellian principle too, of just if you just make the language sound right, people are gonna believe it.
Do you know what my favorite part of the movie was? Welcome to Costco. I love you.
Right? Like that is the thing. There's some things that we can't quote on this because it is inappropriate.
No.
But the basis of the movie, Teodora, you watched it last night.
I did.
Does it might not be the most realistic, but it certainly looks disturbing because I know I was thinking to myself, oh boy, this could happen.
See,
we're 10 steps removed, but we're only 10 steps removed.
Putting aside a lot of like the racism, ableism, and sexism that was inside this movie.
It's a comedy. Keep in mind.
Putting all that aside, I think there were a few interesting points. Do I agree with the entire movie? No. Do I think it's realistic? Not really. Do I see certain things being realistic? Sure. Yeah. And one of the main things that I say, agriculture. Because we're looking at it. It might not be realistic to the point that the movie is describing it to be, but in other instances, like we are actively ruining our agriculture and our soil today. So I feel like in that sense, like we might not be put like in the movie they were putting essentially like a brand, basically like
it was Gatorade.
Yeah, the equivalent to Gatorade. They were putting that on plants instead of water.
It's got electrolytes, and electrolytes are what plants crave.
Yeah, like that was
because
like the whole
plants
thing.
crave Brondo, right? It's this cyclical cycle of like.
This is just the way people thought. Like it was like people stopped reading books, people stopped caring about education. So this is just what if someone told you like, oh, plants crave Brondo,
it's got what plants crave, electrolytes.
Yeah. So then now like that's all you're saying, basically. That's all like you believe. Yeah. So you just start doing that. So that was that. And then like the guy that was very average for our time who woke up then, he ends up being the smartest guy there. And then like he's like, guys, put water on your plants.
And then the plants grew.
And wow, like it was crazy. But they grew way too fast. Like that was also very unrealistic. But like whatever.
maybe the Brondo started doing its job.
Maybe it did. Maybe average Joe was wrong.
I do want to first start off, before we get into the soil part, I want to get
Okay.
into the IQ part that you thought
Okay.
was really important, because I started learning a lot more about IQ rates and some of the importance of them. Now, Teodora and I have gone on record as saying is we don't believe IQ tests are a 100% accurate way of depicting whether an individual, right, because it is a standardized test, whether it's a accurate way of telling how intelligent someone is.
Yeah.
It's a very accurate way of telling how well a person can answer a test,
Yes.
right? Now, I do want to point out that IQ tests are very important for determining the overall intelligence of a nation state or a specific area, because it's able to determine, right, how smart a group of people are being educated, how much assistance they're getting, because it averages out in some way to say that nations with higher GDPs often have higher IQ ratios because they have more standardized education and they have more input in some way, in theory at least.
Mhm.
Now, what I learned was average IQ rates are dropping by 7 points per generation since the 70s, right? Now, that's slightly contested because I found another thing that found that it's not 7 points per generation, although there is an average that's coming out that kind of works out to that if you do some amount of mathematical gymnastics. But what I did find out that seems incredibly more realistic and reasonable is this thing called the Flynn effect. The Flynn effect is a scientific theory, or at least an IQ theory, that every generation will increase in IQ because that has been the predominant thing. The United States has increased since the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
Is that when they started doing the test? Okay.
They started doing mass testing
Mhm.
of people and started standardizing it better. So as the years have gone on, the population has grown, the GDP has grown, the IQ has gone up. However, there is a problem. Now we have run into an issue in the 2000s where IQ rates are dropping. And now it's affecting the Flynn effect, because the Flynn effect, in theory, is as your GDP rises, as your technology advances, as more people get educated, right, your IQ ratio will go up. But technology is advancing, our
I have
GDP
a
is growing,
yeah.
and education, we went from 54 million people being in K through 12, which I think it's probably a little off, to 56 in a matter of a few years, right? So we educated 2 million more people in K through 12. There was another one, I had it right here, where where is it? Let's see. Charter schools are growing. They went from 400,000 to 3 million by 2016, right? So I think charter schools started opening in the late 2000s
Mhm.
in mass.
Yeah.
They grew to, I mean, 400,000 to 3 million is a ridiculous number. So you have to also look at that. And the thing is, people doing these studies, I think it was, I have it right here. Let me see if I can find it. It was a university. I don't have it up anymore, but I think it was like the University of Utah. They had stated that, right, this drop, because it looks like it's going down by 0.35% per year, which means by 2050, um, it'll be down by 3.65% total. So their concern was that although they're saying it doesn't disprove the Flynn effect, it is curious and it is concerning. So if scientists are saying this is concerning because it's violating a principle which has been standard, right? That as we grow, we will continue to grow.
Yeah.
We definitely need to be concerned about something. Now, they're also saying that there are two possible issues to this, right? That are possibly causing this, but they aren't sure. The first thing is pollution, right? That's their argument, is that due to the amount of environmental issues we're going through, the amount of problems that are occurring, pollution could be causing this. The other problem is the education system. Although more people are being educated, are they being educated well, right?
I was gonna say
Now,
it could be the technology. I think that
it
could
could
be
be.
another
It could
theory.
be.
Because if we're saying like
That's the theory
it,
behind ADHD as well. Right now, is that it's on the rise because of technology,
I
right?
think it's like because if we think about it, like yes, as technology like increases to a certain level, like we are our our IQ does like get to increase too. Basically, like what this whole
Yeah,
like thing is talking about. But once we get to like, especially once when they're talking about particularly that we start to see a decline, it's like what's going on there? The rise
yeah,
of the internet.
yeah.
And what's going on the internet? People giving
But
their opinions to
that's
topics.
the other thing
So
too that's important,
that's going on with my
is that
thesis.
the Flynn effect stipulates
Yeah.
that as the internet grows, IQ should be growing with it,
Yes,
because they're
but no.
implementing, because it's allowing for people to have more access to knowledge, right?
Yes, but what type of knowledge? What type of
Exactly.
knowledge?
But that's the other thing too, right? Is in Idiocracy, what type of knowledge were they getting?
Yeah.
Every year
Exactly.
as it
Yeah, actually, it
continued,
is a good point. That is actually a
every
really
year
good
as it
point.
continued, they would lose, their vocabulary would change,
Yeah.
their speech pattern change, which, by the way, is also a threat towards fascist authoritarian governments. When your speech changes, when the worth of your words changes, it leads to the rise of fascists. It's been found when they mince words and they kind of change meanings on the fly and get you to go with it,
So
right?
do you mean like LOL? You mean
Like LOL,
you mean
LOL poses in some way, and granted, it's parried by the idea that, like, in
Yeah.
order to prevent fascist, you have to have unique and people be more individuals, because the more individuals you have, the less you'll be able to determine that there's another, and then you can't like split and divide a group, and you can kind of say like, well, we're all just a big conglomeration of like 30 different people doing 30 different things, but we come together for a common good at the end of the day, right? So if we're all like that, then you can't have a fascist or authoritarian rise up.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, this also points in like, you know, this seems this seems a little bit more. It's maybe a few steps away, but there is a possibility of it, right? Now
Yeah,
you're
possibly.
the other
I
thing.
think especially like taking into consideration like the type of stuff that like trends on online and on social media and the type like people are believing a lot of that,
There are
which I
some people who
get.
see that meme that says Abe Lincoln invented the internet, and they think Abe Lincoln invented the internet
Yeah.
when really it was Al Gore.
You're terrible. The only thing I didn't really like about the movie in particular in regards to like the IQ argument that it was making was that everyone just kind of had this whole it just kind of seemed like they were like
Stupid
reinforcing
people
this.
lead to stupid people.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
just kind of just reinforcing the fact that if someone with a low IQ like has children, those
their
children
children will
are
inherently
doomed.
build.
Like
Yeah,
there's
they'll be
no way
doomed.
they're gonna be.
Yeah,
And I was just like, that just seems like
that is where you.
impossible.
Yeah,
And also like if we're talking about like college education being like because that was also another thing the movie was talking about too. Like at the beginning of the movie, it was like, oh, these people that are college educated, they're waiting to have kids, blah 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 blah. Like, and those are like your ideal people, college educated people, or your ideal people.
that's
That I feel like is
actually
problematic because there's not many people that are college educated that are perfectly fine. Because if
the idea of perfectly fine though is different. The reality is, if you look at a lot of the statistics, people who do possess a college education have a better life expectancy. They have a higher income expectancy.
true, but let's
They
take it back to what we
also,
talked about last week
when your
with student loans.
kids,
Some people can't afford it.
yeah,
Some people can't
that's
afford it all.
correct.
Some people
But
also let's
if
think about it.
you look at the broad scope, right, the statistics that come with it, despite those student loans and what people can and cannot afford, it doesn't mean that the people who are getting college educated are any less more likely to have advantages
So
as we
then, can I
continue
ask you
on.
this question? So now let's put aside America. What about people that? What about like immigrants? What about people that aren't in America seeking an education? So
So
what's the argument there?
that's the
There, it's
problem
different types of
too that
education.
comes
Yeah.
into it, right? Is IQ tests, and this is something that is relevant, and it's a very good point to bring up, right? When you look at the IQ of a nation, right, when immigration increases, the IQ rate often drops because of the increase in people who have been undereducated, right? In most other nations, right, most globally South nations, you have less
Yeah.
education, right? The
The division between
expectation,
the global north and the global
it's a
south.
huge divide, and
Yeah.
it's a very relevant point to bring up how maybe as immigration has risen in the United States from global South countries, that can account for this percentage. And I couldn't find any information about whether this has been weighted, right, to account for that percentage rise, whether they've, negated how many people are here in the public education system or even the private education system, the K through 12 system, realistically, who do not like are we excluding them from this demographic, which I don't necessarily agree with the process of doing, because they do reside in the United States. They are members of the population, of the citizenry, right? They are relevant. They are going to be good examiners of, is this a good process? Because even if technology should increase, right, and the numbers that the government is providing us on how many people are coming to the United States, whether legally or illegally, however you want to view it, right, it should still be relevant because they're in some way functioning members of society. They're still having some input. So if they're raising the GDP, right, by working, if they're involved in the markets while they're working, that's a good point to bring up, and that's a relevant issue. But
Mhm.
still doesn't change the fact that we're going down by a projected 3.65% by 2050. That's if these numbers stay the same. So,
Yeah, I honestly,
and they'll probably go up.
I don't really see what's the pollution argument again. Say that again,
The
because that just
pollution
didn't really make.
argument is that it's IQs are going down due to pollution issues and climate issues, because as the climate's worsening, it's affecting the reproductive process, because there actually is a big thing that's being brought up about microplastics and the effect of microplastics on
Mhm.
reproduction, and if it's negatively affecting it or positively, is that in some way pollution is affecting the reproductive process or the developmental process of children. And that's where
Okay.
this comes into play of this big scope, and it's negatively affecting them. But then again, pollution has always been an issue, right? I mean, even it's a huge issue now, but we didn't get here overnight. This didn't just happen
Yeah.
in the 2000s. This has been around for a long time. Pollution in some ways could be viewed as being worse in other areas for different types of pollution. We used to have lead paint in houses, right?
Mhm.
That's not good for anybody, a grown adult or a child, right? Like, we have in some ways moved on. So I don't necessarily believe that's an accurate thing. I think education system is more likely,
Yeah, I think education system is more likely. I
but
also
that
think
just
that
leads to the further possibility that we soon could be an idiocracy.
yes, but I don't know. I feel like it's just a little bit too. I don't
The
know. I just think
movie's
it's a little
far
too.
fetched,
Yeah,
but the premise of the
yeah.
movie is not.
Which like I'll agree to that. Where it's like there's certain things that we probably are gonna get into, and I think it's not gonna be. We're not gonna be throwing electrolytes on water. I don't think on plants.
I
We're
don't know.
not
Give
gonna
it
be doing that.
75 years. Maybe some will.
No, I don't.
People wanted people to drink bleach to get rid of COVID, and people believed it.
Nobody actually did it though. Who do
Are
you know? Yeah, let's look at it. Let's look at it. Find one person that drank
Isn't the
bleach
internet
during
such a
COVID.
great source? I'm
Yeah,
sure
let's
we can.
let's
Let's look
let's
it
look
up.
it
Thank
up.
God we have laptops
But
this year.
I was just gonna say, like, there's a few things that I don't think are necessarily. I don't like, for example, what I was getting back to, like the agriculture point that we were talking about. We're probably not gonna be throwing electrolytes on plants and expecting plants to grow and being sad that it happened, that it's not growing. But why are you laughing? Did someone actually do it?
Yes.
Really?
Some 4% of respondents reportedly drinking or gargling diluted bleach, with some numbers saying that they even use soapy water or disinfectants to prevent or get rid of COVID-19.
What's your source?
US News.
You know. Well, all right.
Which
Well,
is
you
not
know what?
a terrible source. Those who were among the nearly 40% who were reported using at least one method not recommended by the CDC in an attempt to reduce their chances of contracting the virus.
Okay. Well,
Said they washed their produce. 20% said they washed their produce with bleach.
with
Nearly,
bleach.
yeah. That's a video of a man getting his face dunked in milk. 10% said they had used cleaning disinfectant spray on their bodies, and 6% of respondents reported inhaling vapors from household cleaning disinfectants. The report found that people who used one of the non-recommended methods also reported adverse health effects that they believed were caused by an action more frequently than those who used the recommended methods.
You
So,
know,
did not go well.
I think honestly a whole bunch of this could just
Never say
go
never.
into media literacy, and that is
This can't be a media literacy
I
episode. That's
think
for
it is.
later in the season.
Yeah, you know what? That's fine,
I
but
do
we'll
also
talk
want to
about it
talk about.
later.
I do want to move off
No, I
education.
need
Oh,
no.
continue.
We need to
Take
do
your time.
agriculture because I'm sorry.
Can we
I
do?
think
Can we do something that's just as important? Agriculture. Can we talk about food health a little bit right now?
sure that I feel
Right.
like that
So
goes into
that's
it
that's a
together.
big that's a big point in Idiocracy, right? Is you have all these Carl's Jr., right, to the point where it gets a little like overly crazy, where there's this woman trying to get French fries from a Carl's Jr. vending machine, and then she's fighting with the Carl's Jr. vending machine, and then the Carl's Jr. vending machine knocks her unconscious, and then declares that she's unfit to take care of her kids because she can't feed them, despite the fact that the machine produced an empty box which she had paid for and did not have fries in it like she was supposed to get. So I think that's a really good point,
Also,
because we kind of do that with some stuff already, where it's these giant corporations or bureaucracies that are unaccountable, right? And the service that they're meant to provide. And when they don't provide these services in some instances, I had to deal with a situation like this earlier this week, with the law school admissions council, right? Where they're supposed to provide this service that is in some way either a monopoly or is an overarching, like a giant Fortune 500 company, which affects everything, you know? So you've got these companies and they're not providing the service adequately, which negatively affects the purported customer, right? Because the government is a business. We are a customer of the government willingly and unwillingly, right? When they fail this, then you see this extreme reach where although I don't think Carl's Jr. is going to come take my kids, I do know that the government has failed some people in the past and in turn has taken their kids or has taken their property or has done all these other things that they were supposed to not do, but they did because they didn't provide the original service, right? That's like the whole theory of whether doctors are supposed to treat an illness or prevent an illness, right? Preventative care is slightly more costly in the short term.
I thought what was funny in the movie, the guy that was trying to like when there was like a hospital scene and the guy was like trying to win healthcare. Like it was
Yeah,
like a
it's a game.
it was a game, win free. Like I thought that was funny. But like I don't know, like
And
I think like the premise
healthcare is still a game now.
it's stuff where it's like I don't think it'll happen that way, but it's like we're probably not gonna have like you're not gonna be gambling for healthcare in the future. But I don't see that happening. But
You
yeah,
know, we should probably look and see if people are going to
You
casinos
know-
to gamble to try to pay for healthcare. Let's see.
whatever. But the point that I've been trying to make, if we're talking about even stuff that we know today, we're kind of avoiding that, and I can see how that can play into the movie, like what the movie's talking about. We know when you think of Iraq, right, and you think of the soil in Iraq,
Yeah.
it's
I thought
not.
you were going to a different point about Iraq, but yeah, continue.
No, when you think of Iraq and you think of the soil in Iraq, like, and you think of agriculture in Iraq, it's not that great. You can argue it's
Mhm.
pretty dry land. It's not very fertile. But then what about when you talk about Mesopotamia and you talk about
The
specifically
Fertile Crescent.
yeah, the Fertile Crescent. You're
That
talking
totally
about the Fertile
wasn't up on
Crescent.
your laptop earlier.
It was on my laptop earlier. That was the research I was doing. And we're thinking about that. So how come if you're thinking about it, that's the same land. So how come that land went from being the Fertile Crescent to then being dry land today and it's barely used for agriculture? And you find out it's because of it was this process, soil solidification,
Yes.
right? So it's like there's
The
a lot of salt.
degradation of soil
Yeah,
and
there's a lot of salt left
non-implementation
on
of nutrition.
the top layer of the soil, and it's not being removed. And what's happening in California today? That exact same process. And California is eventually going to become to the point where we're not going to be able to like grow anything out of California. So we're doing the same things today where we're ignoring certain problems. I think the only thing that I will say that I agree with this movie is the fact that we need to pay more attention to climate change. We need to pay more attention to um, our own impacts on the world. And then what are you putting your head down for?
Continue, but I just want to bring up that whole idea of gambling for health insurance because I think I found a response that you're not going to like.
I was just gonna say that was my only point with the movie that I agree on. I agree that we need to pay more attention to climate. We need to pay more attention to just in our own selves having an education system that works and that functions.
So,
That.
he said, hey, people don't, gambling for medical insurance is probably not possible. Well, I found something that's kind of relevant. It's not exactly someone gambling to pay for their medical insurance, but it's someone gambling, winning, and losing their medical insurance or being at risk to lose their medical insurance. So this is on.
Well, that's just because the system's flawed. And that's
But
a whole other other
but
topic.
this is
No,
someone
like I
who's
get it, but it's
trying
not.
to,
I get it, 100%.
and
But it's
this is
not.
on Law Help Minnesota, helping Minnesotans solve legal problems. I just wanted to say that on air because that's funny. And it's a senior. It sounds like it's a senior citizen, or I'm not sure if it's a senior citizen, but it's someone they won $6,000, and because they're on medical assistance, they're going to have to report the amount that they won. And when they report the amount that they won, they're most likely going to lose their medical insurance through the state.
Well,
right?
yeah. So, in other words, we need to create a better system that can account for health
We
insurance.
yeah,
And
of
no one's
course we
arguing
do.
against that. No one's arguing against that.
No one.
I'm
Not a
just
single
saying.
person. But
I'm just saying that the movie.
but
did try to do
who's out there fighting for it?
Bernie.
Yeah, we got like 6 more months on Bernie. Okay, his shelf life is almost like gone.
Terrible.
I want to talk about food a little bit too. I want to talk about the issue of obesity in the United States, which Idiocracy also talks on, right? Obesity is prevalent in the United States. I think everyone knows it at this point. It's when you want to talk about an epidemic, this is an epidemic,
Mm.
right? 41.9% of the United States was declared obese in 2017. It is such a huge problem that it's affecting the military. That means 108 million Americans are affected by obesity, right?
And you know how we could help that? With agriculture.
It's not so broad, right? Because in theory, right, you could.
You
But
could.
the other problem too is you have all of these incredibly unhealthy foods which are prominent,
And
like
less
things
expensive.
like Carl's Jr. and Barando, right? That are less expensive, that can go out to the public, while there's subsidies instead for produce that is needed, it goes to corn, right? So my question is, right, how is this any more different from what Idiocracy presents, right? You have a large quantity of people who are unhealthily eating. You have a large quantity of people who, you know, are not getting the proper assistance that they need or that is reasonable, right? Let's also talk about this, the idea of, and this isn't prevalent in this, it is a little bit, but it's not directly spoken about, right? It's 50% of all marriages end in divorce in the United States. 24 million children live in a single parent household. That's like 1 in 4, 1 in 5, right? I think, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact statistic and I can't do math that well, right? Well, I also looked at it. Birth rates in the United States are lower by 20%. Um, they're arguing, there's a big argument that it's largely caused by the Great Recession in 2008 and the housing market
Mhm.
collapse and a lot of other subsequent issues. But the problem is that means that there's a birth rate ratio, right? So ideally, if you want to have a ratio where your population maintains stable, where you have a stable population, right? You need a 2.1 ratio, right? Or a 2-to-1 ratio, kind of, where you have like births to deaths, and that's what's calculated in. The United States has a 1.6 and China has a 1.3. I didn't know this, but China could lose up to half of its population by 2100 if nothing is done to increase their birth ratio. So 2100 sounds like a big deal, but that's like almost 75 years away. And
Yeah.
if you lose 600 million people in 75
But when you're
years,
thinking about China, China had that one kid policy for a very long
yes,
time, and they weren't able to have so a majority of their
because they
population
couldn't
is
feed their
older.
population.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but a majority of their population is older. So
And
it
male.
makes sense. Yeah, so it makes sense that a majority of their population is going
Yeah.
to, as saying it
But
as harsh as possible,
but
die off soon because at the end of the day, they had one
but
child
the
policy for a very
the
long
the
time. So
the
that's not
issue but
really.
the United States should be concerned because if you look at our social services system, it's largely built upon the fact that you have a younger sect that continues to work and provide for the older sect, and they have paid in, right? So you and I, as
Mhm.
people who work, are paying in to take care of my grandmother and your grandmother and everybody's grandma and grandparents and great grandparents, right? So that way they can continue to live off of their social security. And our kids and our grandkids, they'll work and pay for us to live off of our social security benefits. But if we're not having enough young people come into the world, right? That's another risk that we're posed, right? And that kind of goes off topic from the idiocracy point because they have an overpopulation of people, right? It's their argument of an overpopulation of dumb
Yeah.
people, but this is still a relevant issue where it's like maybe we're two steps we're a lot more than two steps removed. I think I have a little bit more faith, but yet again they also say that the more arrogant you are, the dumber you might be. um you see what I did there,
No.
uh but these are genuine issues about this is about like that's what I'm trying to say is that a movie like Idiocracy, much like a movie like Doctor Strangelove, right? Maybe it's a little unrealistic, but it's probably like 60% accurate, or it's 60% of it, right? If you take the comedy and some of the ridiculous, over the top dramatics of it, if you look at what it's basically saying, it's a little realistic, right? It's you can and you and I both know, right? You have Costco. It's I went to Costco for law school, right? Costco law school, right? I mean, Trump had his own university, but who to think Costco and Walmart were going to get into the university game?
It's
But-
possible because corporations are people now. God knows what they're gonna do moving forward. But
maybe they'll open a church. Speaking
yeah,
of God,
honestly, they probably could.
I'd go to Costco church.
Costco sponsors like everything. I feel well, it doesn't sponsor everything, but Costco's literally one stop
Shop. I love Costco.
So,
Costco's
I
a good
love
place.
Costco too.
But the other thing that I wanted to bring up, right, about the soil. Yeah. The soil. This is the last point, right? It's 57.6 trillion metric tons of agriculture is getting lost because of this, because of the soil. And I think that's a very key point that we need to bring up.
Yes,
and that's what's going to feed people.
Yeah, I agree.
And then it's not going to feed them with Brondo.
Agriculture. I just feel like, I don't know, my biggest thing with this movie was just the fact that I felt like it was a little bit over the top.
It was fun over the top, though.
I was trying so hard to stay awake watching it, but
that's
there
what
were
happens
a few
when you watch
things.
at 3 a.m.
I wasn't watching it at 3 a.m. I was watching it at 11, actually. But yeah, I don't know. I just think it was not. I think it has certain points that we should take into account. Like, for example, paying attention to our agriculture and to climate change.
So you do agree with me? Isn't that crazy? So
I was talking
this
about
Hotheads
agriculture. Literally, let's
episode.
put the episode back. How many times did I say agriculture?
In a win. That's a win for me, folks. I got one on the board. We're not going to count last week because that's an even tie. I got one on the board, folks. You heard it here first, live from the WIUR studios at Iona College in New Rochelle.
It's not Iona College.
Iona University, New Rochelle. One on the board. Thank you, James. Put that on the board for me, please. Thank you.
No, absolutely not. I was literally talking about agriculture this whole time.
2 on the board for me, folks. James is putting 2 on the board for me, folks. Thank you very much, everybody. We can't wait to talk to you more next week. Get excited.
I'm so excited for our topic.
Teodora is excited. I'm going to get 2 on the board next week. She's going to be left with a big old 0, folks. That's the Hotheads board. I just updated it for you guys. We can't wait to speak with you more next week.
Next week we're talking about
bodily autonomy.
So it should be a lot of fun. I can't wait for this one. Bye, guys. Thanks for
2 on the board, folks. 2 on the board. Have a good weekend.
For me, not for you. Sorry. Bye.
For me, not